Suru. Sorry about that. My name is Venkat Suru, and I'm one of the graduate outreach chairs for F1 student doctors, or F1 doctors. And thank you so much for everyone who could make it today. And we're in attendance right now, as we have a really good group of panelists who are current residents who are willing to share with us their experiences with the application process for residencies. So today we have with us Dr. Deng and Dr. Ni and Dr. Lin as well. And they will be answering some of the questions that were submitted to us over our social media platforms. And if throughout this meeting you have any extra questions, please feel free to write it down in the chat. But are our three panelists okay with this being recorded?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, perfect. And we'll be sharing this recording with more people who can benefit from this information. So thank you so much for being here. And I'll let you introduce yourselves.
Okay, I can go first. I'm Amy. I am currently an ophthalmology resident at Emory. I'm Canadian, and I'm very excited to be doing this. I actually did this for Emory when I was a medical student. So I think this is like a really important topic that I essentially went in blind for. So I think it's helpful that y'all are doing this for everybody else.
I can go next. Hi, everyone. I am Penny. I am currently a third-year IM resident at Mass General Hospital in Boston. I am Chinese. I came to the US for college as well. So I'm very glad that we have this opportunity to share a little bit about, what we've done as we navigate the visa situation. And I hope it could be helpful for all of you.
Hi everyone, my name is Mona. I'm also internal medicine resident, second year. Currently I'm at UCLA. I am also Chinese. I came to the States for college as well. It's been 10 years.
Awesome. And my colleagues, if you'd like to introduce yourselves as well, my teammates.
Hi, everyone. I'm Wendy. I'm also one of the graduate outreach. Directors with Venkat, and I'm currently a second year medical student at Emory.
Hi everyone, my name is Guri Tomi John, and I am currently a gap year student. Just finished undergrad, and I am from Nigeria. Nice to meet you.
All right, so once again, if you have any other questions during this meeting, feel free to type it in the chat, but we'll get started with the questions that were submitted to us. Any of the panelists, feel free to answer if you have a good answer, a good insight into your journey as well. So the first question is, how do we navigate through this process, and what are the different types of visas that are available?
Okay, I can go first. So I forgot to mention earlier, I went to college in the States and I also did med school at Emory. So I only have, I guess, insight as somebody who's a US medical graduate. But as far as the process went for me, I knew very little initially, but what I came to learn is that there's two main visas that at least I knew of, and it was either the H-1B visa or the J-1 visa for residency. And so everybody comes, at least for me as a med student in the States, I came in with an F-1 visa. And so when I applied for residency, I actually looked at this website called FREIDA AMA. And on FREIDA, it's FREIDA AMA, you can Google it. You can actually filter programs by whether they give H-1B visas or J-1 visas. It's not always accurate. Sometimes it's outdated. So it gives you a rough idea of what programs accept those visas under which specialties as well. So I filtered for ophthalmology, and I think I ended up getting about 60 different programs. And then from there, I essentially applied to all of them. And whichever interviews I got, I specifically like called the GME office to confirm that they have that visa. Because what you'll find on the interview trail is that program directors do not know. And a lot of the times the program coordinators do not know if they sponsor visas. So the only people who really truly know will be the GME directors. So I think, you know, to summarize on where to start, it would be filtering, using FRIDA on which programs accept H-1Bs or J-1s. And then once you get interviews, or if there are programs that you're very interested in, calling the GME directly to ask about it. And then as far as how the visas work, the H-1B is basically an employee visa. And that's the one that I've heard is the most advantageous. Whereas the J-1 visa it was in the past known as more of like an exchange visitor visa. And so what that means is there are like connotations to that. So once your J-1 visa expires, then you have to go back to your home country to practice for a couple of years, or you can get a waiver. And I'm sure somebody else can talk about that because I've talked for too long. So basically FRIDA website, which somebody just shared, and then talk to the GME to confirm it. And then think about the plus and minuses of both of those visas. But if you're able to, I would recommend the H-1B.
Yeah, just to piggyback off what Amy just said, I think doing the due diligence is really important. I actually cold emailed, or my partner at the time helped me, actually wrote a Gmail code to automatically email all of the program coordinators about basically confirming the visa policy, that application cycle for that specific program, and specifically for us who are American medical graduates. Because to be honest, from my personal experience applying to the different internal medicine residency programs, FRIDA doesn't, UCLA would issue H-1B visa or sponsor H-1B visas, but they don't publicize that on FRIDA. I think just because, you know, there's thousands, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of IMGs who would be looking through them. And I think that would, you know, overwhelm the application system if they actually all apply, because if, you know, UCLA were to disclose that they would sponsor H-1B visa. So for us, we really have to, you know, our like us American medical graduates really have to reach out individually to the programs that you care about, you want to apply to, and specify, you know, this is like, I go to this medical school in the US, I will be graduating. What is the policy this year? Because for my year, things also was difficult because it's the first year after COVID. UW, I remember specifically, I'm calling names, I hope that's okay, but it was the fact, you know, that year they decided to not take in or not sponsor any H-1B visas just because of all the COVID impact. And that policy can change year to year, which is, you know, unfortunate. It's luck of the draw, but that's the reality that we're facing. So for yourself, you just need to remember to advocate for yourself and be responsible, do your due diligence. And like Amy was saying, a lot of the people don't know what they're talking about. It's like asking a doctor, what's the visiting policy on the unit? You have to go to the nurse, you have to go to the charge nurse or whoever is actually, you know, aware of the most recent updates. So even if one person promised you that, oh, we sponsor, you want to verify, you want to trust but verify. You can, what I did was that at the beginning, yeah, I cold emailed a lot of people. And then if they don't, like I had a whole Excel spreadsheet logging like who responded, who said that they have H-1B available, which ones only had J-1 available. And then if they didn't respond after a week, I re-emailed them. If they still don't respond, I try to call them, things like that. And then at the end, even after I finished interviewing with them, even after I received interview with them, I asked to be connected with a current resident who is on an H-1B visa just to make sure, be, you know, really sure that this is something that the program has experience with. I feel like personally, I'm just a very anxious person. Like I would hate the situation where I match to a program that that is not sponsored. Then I don't know, like, do I reapply for match? Like, what is that going to be? What is that going to look like? And And I actually did have one or two programs that went back on their words even after they interviewed me. So I feel like there's definitely some kind of miscommunication. Like they invested that one interview spot in me without themselves realizing that they cannot sponsor that visa. And so that is something just you have to be responsible for yourself. Double check, triple check with the different people, and then have the current residents who are on H-1B visa walk you through the process. Like how's the OPT to H-1B transition? How does that look like? Because I'm sure some of the people here might be applying to like prelim positions. That's a whole ballgame because we can talk about that later. Yeah, like how does that process look like? Just be extra sure. No one else, there are very few of us each year. I think I looked it up before. I think there's like less than 300 of us non-US citizens every year graduating from medical schools. We have to advocate for ourselves, our own specialty, our own home country, where we come from, the specific medical school that we are going to be graduating from are all unique cases. Just assume that no one else has done this before, and you have to be fully responsible and take ownership of this whole process.
I did everything in a very similar way. I also used Frida to start generating initial list of the programs that are willing to sponsor. And I also individually emailed the program coordinators for programs I was interested in. And also during the interview, I specifically asked about the visa situation to the program director, because I thought at the time, based on their response to visa, I could also have a better idea of what is the general policy like, how supportive they are. If the program director is very familiar with the process, and it's more likely that they're more friendly to residents who need visas. And also, when I applied, it was the year when we could still have in-person interviews. I got to meet with some other residents who also were in a similar situation. So I had a better idea of what the process was like for them at that specific program. So I thought all of those were pretty helpful. And for to generate that list, I also kind of asked friends I knew or other people I knew who applied to IM a year before me or 2 years ahead of me, and kind of asked them what kind of programs they applied to, which programs gave them an interview the year before, just have a general sense of, how friendly the program is to, residents who need a visa. I think all of those were pretty helpful for me. I applied to, I would say, more than 20 programs, and I got 14 interviews, and I went to all of them, which was pretty helpful too, because I could share some of the programs that I thought at that time when I applied were more friendly to applicants who need a visa, with the understanding, that things could have changed in recent years, but we can talk more about that too.
Hi, Venkat, can I add something real quick?
Sure.
So first of all, Penny, Amy, and Mona, thank you so much for being here today. My name is Mateus. I'm the executive director for F1 Doctors. I just want to thank the team for putting out the panel. I was having some issues with my phone, so I was late to the party, and my camera is not working. So, but yeah, thank you. Just for everyone watching too, I just want to clarify, I'm sure they all mentioned the OPT, J1 and H1B. We get a lot of questions about that in our Mentee platform. And it's like Mona said, you do need to take ownership over that, unfortunately, because all the countries that we've come to realize have different stipulations as to how to go about those visas. Just know that technically one OPT, there'll be an extension of your F1 that programs will normally ask for of that, so that you can get an H1B after that 1 year extension. And then to H1B, you need to be have taken level 1, 2, and 3, or step 1, 2, and 3 in order to get H1B. That's one of the stipulations that I was told by one of the lawyers that I spoke to at a program. And then the J1 would be the one that has the requirement to go home, which can be waived, which Amy mentioned before. So that's just something that I wanted to add that for our mentees.
I want to quickly, sorry to interject. In terms of the step 1, 2, and 3 requirement is actually something that's not true for American medical graduates. We do not need to pass step 3. However, the caveat is that because there are so few of us every year, USCIS does not know their own policy. And actually there is someone from one class above me at UCLA, a Canadian guy who actually went through the trouble. Like, we technically don't need the step 3 score, but you want to take it early in your intern year, just so that even if USCIS screw up and then treated us as if we're IMGs, we can still get our H-1B visa. But that's something, you know, I think after we match, we can talk about, you know, specifically the timing of step 3. But yeah, I guess just to clarify, H-1B is something also, I think people should start looking into the application sooner rather than later, because there's like very specific timelines and you want to get everything squared away on the earlier side, just to have the peace of mind. I remember from my year, it's something like there's like one specific date when you're supposed to graduate, right, on your I-20. And then 60 days before that date is the first day that you can start applying for OPT. And after you apply, it of course takes time to process. And then because of our different institutions, different medical schools will give you that end date differently. Sometimes it's like the end of June, but you know, like a lot of our graduation and the start of intern year happens during June. You can't wait all the way until like April to just start applying. I have friends who matched to Mayo. He's a guy from Jamaica, who got screwed over because of that, because he didn't start preparing his OPT application early enough. I mean, it's not a major screw up because eventually he just took some time off without getting paid. He missed orientation and then, you know, missed the first couple of rotations. But it's something that you should start looking into, because sometimes programs will determine that, oh, actually for UCLA, for example, they changed my I-20 to make the end date earlier, just so that I can start applying for OPT earlier. And that started in January. So in January, I was putting together all of my paperwork for OPT, just so that when the 60, like the T-60, when that day comes, I send out my material right away. And with, you know, COVID, everything's delayed. You just want to give as much leeway as possible for yourself, or else, you know, you will be traveling, or you will be, it's just something that you will constantly bother you if it's not completed.
And I'll just add on to that. I think it is really important to get plugged in with your like international student services office, like as soon as, like, I would say like when you start even like applying for residency, just to like talk to them, let them know like that you're applying for residency, and like get their specific input on the timeline of when OPT and all of that stuff, the deadlines are, because it's going to be dependent on like the institution as to like how they want to like proceed. And so I remember I like started talking with like our representative like very early on when I started applying, just to give them a heads up that I'm going to be like applying for OPT and all this stuff, so that they could tell me all the documents that I needed ahead of time, so that you're not scrambling for all of those documents like, you know, in January or whenever you match.
Yeah, don't underestimate, I think, the amount of time you need to prep and get those paperwork ready. You have to find all of your old I-20s. You have to get, I can't remember now, but there's a bunch of like old transcripts or old diploma that you have to put together. Like there's like a lengthy form that you have to fill out. It never hurt to start that process early, and then, you know, you can sit on the completed paperwork, but you can't, you know, turn back in time and wish that you started earlier. I think you don't have to start like right now, but I remember December, like winter break, or like right after people start to come back to office for the winter or the spring semester, was when I started reaching out. And I think I started applying in February. That's how early UCLA was able to help me push my graduation date and give me the T-60 to sometime in mid-February. And yeah, I was able to get all of my paperwork the employment authorization card, the EAD card, earlier. Do we need to obligate to work on OPT for intern year? We do not. Okay, so sorry.
Sorry, I had a question, but I can wait till you answer that question.
Okay. Yeah, I think Preksha just put in the chat. I don't know if everyone else sees it. Do we have to use OPT to work for intern year? We do not have to, but for a couple of reasons, I think it's advantageous. First of all, I think we mentioned the the whole step 3 score, whether it's required or not, even though it's not required, but I think very few programs really like it. There's a very limited turnaround time for you to actually apply for H-1B visa after you match. And also for H-1B visas, I think you can only continue using it for 6 years max. And then you will have to either leave the US or you have to get some kind of green card or switch to a different type of visa. So for a lot of us, if you want to think about internal medicine plus a cardiology fellowship plus a potential interventional cardiology fellowship, who knows, you might go beyond that 6 years of limit. So having that one additional year can potentially help you. Let me just try to simplify and then say that's why it's advantageous to have that one additional year under OPT instead of starting your year count for the H-1B already.
Yeah, I think there's another question here in the chat, but I think maybe we can answer your question first.
My question was to Mona as she was talking. When you said you started reaching out the spring semester, like after people started coming back from the holidays, this was the year you were going to start residency, correct?
Yes, it's the winter of my 4th year.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, there's a question about, is there a chance that our program applies for H-1B, but we don't get it? Is there a lottery system? So usually the hospitals we're going to be working at are considered nonprofit organizations. So because of that, we actually don't need any lottery. So if your program is willing to sponsor H-1B for you, it's pretty much guaranteed that you're able to have it. There's no lottery involved.
That's also, I think, one question you can ask the legal team or the GME office about, the precedents, like has there been successful cases? You don't want, I don't know, I guess a program making empty promises. You want to hear the actual success stories. But I feel like, like we're medicine doctors, like if a good program is willing to accept us, I doubt that USCIS would be the one to say no. I haven't heard, I guess I haven't heard of any failure cases. Yeah.
I think there was another question in the chat. The question was, did any of you do away rotations? And if so, did you run into any issues being on a visa and going to a different school?
By having difficulties with being on a visa, does that mean getting the away, or does that mean like matching there, or like transferring your visa status over to a different school for residency? I'm not sure.
I think they meant getting the rotation, like
getting the rotation. Okay. Yeah. So I did an away at another residency program that also sponsored H-1Bs for residency. I don't think they counted it against me that I was doing or that I was on a visa. I actually made it pretty clear that I was on a visa, because at the end of the day, you don't want to waste time at an away that is not going to take somebody that needs a visa. But honestly, like, I don't think, even if they didn't take visas and you applied, I honestly don't even think they would reject you necessarily, because even with residency applications, there is a specific tick box that says if you need a visa or not. And most program directors don't even look at that. So even when they interview you, knowing that you need a visa and they might not have one, they just don't know. They don't look at that box. I don't know why it doesn't show up for them. So ultimately, just like everybody else was saying, like, it's really up to you, unfortunately, to like do your due diligence, to like make sure you're spending your time valuably with like rotations and other stuff.
Yeah, I think what Amy brought up is also, I think everybody should be like very truthful about, you know, their requirement for a visa. Because I feel like I always get the sentiment that people want to hide the fact that they need visas and then just to, you know, artificially inflate the number of interviews that they get. But honestly, if a program is not equipped with that ability, at the end of the day, you can't go there. So you want, even if, like, I remember doing the filters or, you know, like cold emailing and then finding out that there are only 30 programs in total that I can apply to, or like that I want to really apply to. I know that every single one of them counts. I don't want like an artificial number of like, oh, 60 program or like 100 program that I can apply to just to throw my application fee away. Like I want, at the end of the day, you just need one program to really accept you and be able to support you with the type of visa that you need. So be very truthful, and you don't want to waste the time and energy and also money on the other programs that just they're not going to bend their rules just for you. I really doubt that.
Thank you so much for all the input. I'm going to move on to the next. Sorry, someone saying something?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Elef. I'm a third-year medical student at Kansas City University. I'm a DO student. I had a question for Dr. Amy, actually, because I have started my searching for programs. And I lived in Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia for 6 years. So Emory was on the top of my list for the institutions that I would like to go to for residency. And when I was doing my research, it says that Emory does not sponsor H-1B visa on their website. So I wanted to double check with you to see if you are able to get that visa. If not, do you have J1 at the moment, or how is that process for you? Basically?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I am on an H-1B visa, and I think it is essentially one of those things that is unspoken, just like what was said earlier, where like, even though they say J1, I know plenty of people within the internal medicine program that are on H-1Bs. The other thing that you'll have to realize too, that I realized, you know, later rather than sooner, was that every specialty or department within the same like university will have different feelings about the H-1B. So if the IM program does sponsor H-1Bs, that does not mean that the urology program will also sponsor H-1Bs, because you essentially need the approval of like the department chair and the program director, and like their ability to like fund you, because H-1Bs cost money. It costs like thousands of dollars to file. And so it's just really important to remember that even if you know people at an institution that are not in the same specialty as you that have an H-1B, does not mean that you will get an H-1B in a different department. So at Emory specifically, I know multiple people in IM who are on H-1Bs. I don't know if things have changed since COVID, but I'm on an H-1B in the ophthalmology department. I'm sure, I think like ENT and orthopedics also sponsor H-1Bs, but I think a lot of the times it's like a case-by-case basis.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
That was actually the next question. So thank you, Dr. Amy. The next question was, are there specialties that are more difficult than others because of the F1 status? If Dr. Nee or Dr. Dang would want to add anything about that. If not, I can move on to the next question.
I feel like in general, internal medicine is going to be easier just because the sheer number of applicants, like they just see us more often because there are more of us applying, just because IM is a bigger specialty than other specialties. Yeah,
Yeah, I would
pathology
agree.
maybe.
Yeah, I would agree. I think just because there are more of us and they usually have more experience with sponsoring a visa based on what we've done previous years. So usually I would say if the program is willing to sponsor, I don't think that really changes your, for example, competitiveness in terms of the IM program based on my experience.
But don't change, you know, your career choice because of that.
Yeah, definitely not. So just like to quickly add on. So like with ophthalmology, it's a much smaller department, you know, at every single institution. And I was very afraid that that was going to make it a lot harder, but I know multiple people who are on F1s who later are on H1Bs who are at great institutions. It's like not impossible, but I think it's just scarier to try to apply it into a specialty that just like, you know, historically there's fewer people, there's fewer residents in each institution, but it's possible. So don't like rule out specialties just based on that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, oh, sorry.
Go
I think
ahead.
there's
Go
a
ahead.
question, yeah, in the chat. What if we expect a change in our visa status, possibly to a green card during 4th year prior to starting residency? I think apply as if you still need that visa, just so that you can get your bases covered, you know, for whatever reason, you know, if green card falls through. Yeah, like I think it's easier to peel back or like ask for less from the program than to ask for more later. Yeah, and I think it'll be beneficial if you can talk to your own like immigration lawyer or whoever to get a like a timeline. Or if you're applying for green card, try to get it on the sooner side, just so that you guys can have the peace of mind. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't face that situation. I don't know if Penny or Amy have other insights.
I actually don't really know whether you can apply for both at the same time. I don't know how that works. So yeah, definitely talk to your immigration lawyer about that. I also just feel like with green cards nowadays, there's like a huge backup in like them like, you know, giving you the interviews. Like I feel like a lot of my friends have been applying for 2 years. So it's just like one of those things that's like very unpredictable. But I don't really know if you can have like an application pending for green card and OPT. Unclear.
Yeah, for the next question, whether we have to reiterate that we would like a H1B or a J1 during an interview. This is something I actually personally did during my interview process. I asked each program director where I interviewed about what their visa policy is like. Although based on, you know, some discussions with prior residents, I already kind of knew what the policy is, just to confirm this is still the case in the year I applied. And also it was quite helpful for me, as I mentioned, having a general sense of how familiar the program director is with the visa process. I remember some programs, the program director was like, oh yeah, of course, we have a lot of people who are on visas, so we're very familiar with it. And I think that was definitely a plus for me. Whereas for some of the other programs, the program director was either very hesitant about it, saying something like, yeah, in some rare cases, we're willing to do it, or was just completely unfamiliar with that. And that was kind of a flag for me. And I think it's very, very helpful to directly address this during the interview, at least based on my experience.
Thank you.
I think we had one more question in the chat. Should we have an immigration lawyer during our 4th year? And if so, what would be a good idea to get them?
Yeah, I was trying to answer that question. For H1B, so H1B is going to be offered by your or sponsored by your institution that you match to. they should be, they should have their own legal team to proceed with that. There's nothing that really you're providing, in terms of documentation or whatever proof. You should not be the person to initiate this process. For J1, I didn't apply for that personally, but my impression is that you get something from the ECFMG, and I don't think a lawyer is needed. Oh, for OPT, no, OPT is it's a very simple process. You basically just need the Office of International Students and Scholars. It's a very standardized process for any, not just medicine, but any, like somebody graduate college with a bio major or computer science major, they want to do internship or they want to start looking for jobs, they apply for OPT. That's a very common process for all the international students in the US. No, you don't need a lawyer for that. You just need to get the process started, know the timeline, yeah, and then get the paperwork ready.
Thank you so much. And for this next question, I know so far we've been talking about specific types of visas and putting an emphasis on reaching out to the programs to get more information directly from them and double checking, verifying all those things. But how do we know which hospitals or which programs are international friendly, international student friendly? Because I think just because they accept H-1Bs or offer H-1Bs, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they're friendly. So do you have any advice on that?
I feel like for the most part, the bigger institutions will always be more international friendly. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that they have a lot more like, I guess like prestige and power in some ways. And so like for them, getting those visas is really easy. They're like a well-oiled machine. And they also just, if you are a, top 30 institution, you are used to having international students from around the world at an undergrad level, graduate level. So like, I think overall, those are the types of institutions that will most frequently be both international friendly, and like you'll have colleagues who are more likely to be like also international because they're comfortable with like supporting that visa process. I think a lot of it has to do with the comfort level that these institutions have on a college graduate student like residency level in like the immigration, paperwork and all that stuff.
For internal medicine, I think, is it okay if I drop names, like which, I guess I can say the positive things, which ones are good? I think Pittsburgh and Mayo Clinic really stood out during my interview trail. Yeah, during my interview, the application season. Pittsburgh actually has their own IMG pathway. That's for IMGs, but still like they have the same legal team that helps the AMGs, American medical graduates, to navigate the visa process. So they're extremely well versed in helping with visa struggles. Mayo Clinic, they sort of bragged about how they attract the brightest of minds, and they don't care which country or what visa you're on, they are going to help you out. Yeah, those two really stood out. But yeah, and any other top 30 institutions, I guess, like Amy was saying, they have the power, and then they want to attract good applicants, regardless of the one little hiccup. They will have the money and the legal team support.
Yeah, I agree. I think I also interviewed at Mayo and Pittsburgh, and I think based on my discussion with their program and some of the residents, they all said the program was very supportive when they applied for the visa. And also, I think when I interviewed, Vanderbilt was also quite friendly with sponsoring visas for people. And sometimes it doesn't hurt to reach out, even if Frida said the program does not sponsor. I think sometimes you got like good surprises when you individually reach out to them. And sometimes the programs are more flexible for US medical school graduates. So it's always good to ask and see whether, in your case, whether the program is willing to help.
Dr. Deng, did you have something to say?
Oh, I just saw the question in the chat about the not specifically for international students, but how do we research which programs have a better culture for sick leave or accommodating students with chronic conditions? Or I guess the general, culture kind of questions. I don't know if Reddit is the best source of information, but it does have a lot of people commenting on there. I think also that's joking. You utilize your own medical school's alumni network. I think, just look at, the match list from maybe from the last 3 to 5 years and see people where they have matched. I think usually with that connection, both of you graduating from the same medical school, people are more likely to be truthful, or you have something to compare with, like compared to my own medical school, how does this place feel like? You guys would be, more likely on the same page when you guys are talking about, like, does this place feel more or less compared to our home institution or things like that. They would be able to kind of give you a lot of insight and sometimes maybe share with things that other, residents during the recruitment hours, those are the people, who will be bragging about their program no matter what. But they might share with you something that's maybe more truthfully. Yeah.
All righty, thank you. And for this next question, our mentees wanted to know, how many programs on average did you apply to?
That'll really depend on what your specialty that you're applying into is going to be. For me, with ophthalmology, I knew it was competitive anyways. I think like the average number of applications is like 54 or something, or 54 to 60. So for me, because there were, I think, 60 odd programs that either sponsored an H-1B or a J-1, I just applied to all of them.
Yeah, I applied to, I think, about 21 programs for IM, and I interviewed at 14. I ranked all 14 just because because of the visa situation. And I think for IM, some of my friends actually interviewed at fewer programs. They all did pretty well. So just because IM, it's usually a larger program and they take a little bit more people. So I would say around 20 to 25 is more than safe usually.
Yeah, and I definitely, I think, well, by the way, after this question, I'm going to leave. Thank you all for organizing this. Yeah, depending on the specialty, like, like even for a US citizen, like if they apply for ortho or derm, they're going to apply to 80 programs compared to internal medicines, maybe like 25 to 30 programs. So different specialty shouldn't take that into consideration. Also, depending on if you have ties to the area, if you want to just apply for like SoCal programs, or if you want to apply to bi-coastal or whatever you're willing to accept. So a number is a number. I don't want this to be like, something that everybody should be like, thinking about that number too specifically, but just whatever makes sense for you. Yeah. Thank you all for organizing this. I will go to my next thing.
Thank you, Mona.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dan.
Oh, and feel free to reach out to me through email. I think I shared it earlier. I'm more than happy. I like oversharing things.
So for our next question, is there an opportunity for green card or getting the green card during residencies?
Yes, there are. So I have a couple of friends who are in ophthalmology residencies who are applying for a green card. The green card is the time to get a lawyer, an immigration lawyer, for sure. The two people that I know who are actively applying right now are going through a specific route called it's the pathway that's called person of extraordinary ability. Because I think there are different ways that you can get a green card, right? Like marriage, among other things. And one of them is this person of extraordinary ability. And so I think usually if an immigration lawyer is not super familiar with that pathway, they're going to tell you that it's really difficult because the way that it's described on the website is like, oh, you have to be like an author, or you have to have like invented something, or you have to be famous for something. But that's not true. And so, I mean, once you get to that stage, I think there are like specific immigration lawyers that are very good at helping physicians get the green card through this pathway. But I will say that it takes a few years. I think my friends have been waiting for like 2 years now, but it can be done. So once you get into residency, and you get your bearings and you're on an H-1B, then you can consider like talking to green card lawyers and figuring that out. For me, luckily, my husband is American, so I'm applying through the marriage route, just because it's faster as well.
Yeah, I also thought about this, and I spoke with a few different lawyers. I haven't started the official process yet, but I think as Amy mentioned, it's good to speak with different lawyers and counselors, and just because they have different specialties. And I think as doctors, our credentials might be a little bit different from just PhDs and researchers. So speaking with the right people will be quite important. And we can definitely talk more once you guys are matched into residency. But I think what I was thinking that usually for the transition from medical school to residency program, a lot of us have been just purely using OPT, and then with a transition to H-1B, just because the green card process, if you go through the marriage route, there's still a few years in terms of the process, depending on your home country, of course. And I just think that given that, making sure this program is still willing to sponsor the visa in the meantime is quite important.
Awesome, thank you. And I think we have time for one more question here. So did you get asked about F1 status on interviews?
Nope, nobody even knew.
I think for IM, some of the program directors actually did bring it up to me. It was either me bring it up to them, or they brought it up to me. And I think the most important thing is to be very honest, because in the end, you will need a visa to be able to join this residency program. So definitely be open about what your needs are. And I think, as I said multiple times, gauging their response and how willing they are to support you can be quite helpful when you are just putting up your rank list. And I think every time, and actually for all the programs, I made a point to bring it up to the program director. And if they are already discussing this with you, and I think it's a good sign.
Right, yeah, that's exactly what I did too. So anytime where they always ask like, do you have any other questions at the end of the interview? That was always like my go-to question. Like, what is your experience with people or applicants who need visas? And like, do you have anybody you can connect me to already in the program? And there are some, I think Brigham had, because I was doing like prelim interviews too, but like Brigham had like a club that had like a bunch of people who like international students or something like that. And that's like a really great sign. And that way you can connect to people right away. And they can also share their stories about other programs that they applied to. So that was like a helpful question to ask in multiple ways.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And any other parting advice that you have for us before we end this meeting?
I would like to quickly talk about like your decision to include J1s or not. And I think this is really important based on also what specialty you go in. So for me, with ophthalmology, I was pretty leery about J1s. I ended up including them in my rank list, but the problem is with J1s, people always say that you can, get the 2 years back home thing waived. But a lot of the times, and from what I read, I don't know if it's changed, but usually that waiver is under what we call I think it's called Conrad 15 or something. And the way that policy works is in every state, they give a certain amount of waivers to J1 visa holders to stay in the country and serve in an underserved area in that state. That doesn't necessarily mean the middle of nowhere. You can be underserved. So say, for example, in Atlanta, you can be underserved in like downtown Atlanta and like work at Grady Hospital where a lot of people are uninsured. However, the big caveat to that is a lot of those people who get those waivers are going to be internal medicine people, family medicine people, and psychiatry. So if you're trying to do ortho or ENT or ophthalmology, the likelihood of you getting a waiver is pretty low. So just like keep that in mind. You have to, if you are, willing to put a J1 on your rank list, you have to either be completely open to going back to your home country for 2 years, with, not a very clear way of getting back into the US. It's just like kind of difficult, I think, and a little bit more nebulous. Or, you have to think about the fact that you might not get a waiver if you go into certain subspecialties.
Yeah, I just want to say, don't let the visa situation deter you from choosing the specialty you wanted. And actually, I think when I was applying for internal medicine, I was very worried because my options were limited. But I think after going through the interview process, I actually realized there were more programs than I thought that were willing to help me and support me through this process. And they also connected me with their existing residents and, provided like more resources than I needed to go through this. So I would say definitely reach out to all the programs you're interested, and you might be able to find some like very pleasant surprises. And I think more people are willing to help sometimes than you think.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much to our panelists for coming up today and giving us your insight into the application process. It was super helpful. I know I learned a lot of things myself, so I'm hoping a lot of the mentees did as well. And in the respect of time, I think we're going to go ahead and close this meeting. So our panelists have graciously provided their contact information as well. So feel free to reach out to them if you have questions. And in terms of the F1 doctor standpoint, I would like to emphasize the importance of mentees finding their own legal advice for visa-related issues, whether that's their school or program or a lawyer or whatever that may be, because we're technically not allowed to provide that legal advice to you. So just emphasizing that point. But once again, thank you so much to our panelists and wish you best of luck.
Thank you for hosting. We hope this was helpful.
Thank you so much, everyone.